So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining for Coffee Conversations. Today, I'm really excited. I'm wearing a shirt, teaser. So today is Melissa Rich, and Melissa has she's founded this company that is a legacy from her mom, and it's amazing. So we're going to get there. But first, let me introduce her. So Melissa comes to us from San Francisco, and I'm going to read like I always do because I don't want to mess it up. So she started out with it. She was an investment at Intel. She was in investments at Intel Capital, which led her then to Classroom Connect, always in education, and then which led her to found her own company in San Francisco, right? Interschoola, and then led her down this path where she came to us in Indianapolis. And now she's the founder of Supersisters, and it's fascinating. And I can see it on the wall behind you. So I'm so excited for you to join us today.
Thank you.
So tell us, so let's start with, what is Supersisters? Let's start there.
So Supersisters is a reintroduction of a company that was founded by my mother and my aunt in 1978. And the company was founded in response to a question posed to my mother by me as an 8-year-old. When I was younger, I played on all my dad's sports teams, including his baseball team and his soccer team. And he loved to coach. My brother had no interest, so I was the chosen one to play on his sports teams. So as a result of my baseball playing, I collected baseball cards, which was very common amongst my mostly boy peers, my male friends. And one day I came home and I asked my mom, why aren't there pictures of girls on cards? That isn't fair. And so she and my aunt got together and took it upon themselves and said, you know what, it isn't fair that girls don't have that kind of representation to look at, to trade, to access in a fun, accessible way.
Yeah.
And so they applied for a New York State Department of Education grant, got the grant. It was a very small amount at that time. I'm guessing somewhere in the range of $3,000 to $4,000. Somewhere in our records, we have the official amount. And that was to research the cards, print the cards, and start to distribute the cards. Originally, printing and distributing to school districts. That was the idea. That, this representation of women in leadership positions was not even available in textbooks. It just very few, biographies or snippets of what women had accomplished in history. So Supersisters was meant to do that. And, it turned into a mail order business. It was a mail order business. The number again of cards sold or series sold is somewhere out there. But they quickly decided that in addition to just doing women in sports, complement to baseball cards, they would go beyond sports and look at women in politics and entertainment and science and, just you name it. And so they researched about 500 women that were living American women at the time who were first in their fields or significant prize winners. So they set up a criteria, research these 500 women by going to the library and spending hours and hours and hours in every library they could find, combing through who's who to find out who were the 500 women that they would reach out to. And
let's remind everyone, this is pre-internet. So
this is
1970s.
Well, pre-internet.
Pre-internet.
Yes. So their source was the Who's Who guide. That was an old book that existed. And we drafted a letter, and I say we because they included my question, and I got to sign the letters. And we wrote to these 500 women, and the first 72 that responded became the first set of Supersisters cards. And there's a whole reason why it's 72. It had to do with the way you could, at that time, the only way that you could print baseball card stock, baseball card size, was by starting with a poster size piece of paper, thick cardstock, that could basically feature 72 cards laid out, and then those cards were cut and collated. So 72 became the magic number. Those were the first 72, the women that responded. Their card numbers are in the order in which they responded. And it became the Super Sisters first series. And what was really interesting is, again, back in 1978, my mom and my aunt did not have the wherewithal to concentrate on how to gain store placement, aisle placement against Topps, who was the creator of most of the baseball cards. Mm-hmm. Again, pre-Pokemon cards, pre all this other stuff. So it really was at that time mostly baseball cards. So mail order never became a huge business from a revenue standpoint, but what happened was the media found out about Super Sisters, and it just gained, honestly, worldwide media attention, and the likes of which they just never anticipated. Yeah. So all that is a long way of saying that they did this. They did it from about 1978 to about 1984. We think was the last deck of cards sold of the original set. They had plans to do a second set. They actually had a number of women who had also sent in their permission letter, but weren't amongst the first 72. So there was going to be a second set. And as you'll hear me say probably several times in this conversation, we say life got in the way. It didn't happen. But there had been all this media attention. And so we didn't really think much about Super Sisters for the ensuing 35 or so years. But when I was living in the Bay Area, and I had started my own company called Interscola in the education space, and I ran it for about 12 or 13 years. And I was in the process of winding that company down. And literally the last week that I was in the office, I came back to my desk, and one of my colleagues had put a note. I missed a call from a reporter from ESPN. Yeah. And he had come across the cards in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which we knew about. They were bequested to the Met by a significant baseball card collector, like the most prominent baseball card collector out there at the time had bequested not only his baseball card collection, but also his Super Sisters cards, which he had in his collection. So he had come across the cards and asked if he could do an article. So this was 2014, and he published an article in 2015, and people started saying, now's the time. You've got to, reintroduce the cards, bring them back, bring Super Sisters back to life. So, at the time, it wasn't the right time for me. We were adopting our second child, and a lot was going on. Really excited by the interest, but it didn't happen in 2015. 2017, we got contacted by a very exciting another group in California, the California Democratic Party, who had learned of the cards from the ESPN article. They asked if they could bring it back for a very much a bipartisan celebration of their work together, the California Republican Party and the California Democratic Party. And again, we thought that it might happen in 2017, various reasons, not on our end, didn't happen. And so a year later, we were moving to Indiana with my family from California. My husband is from Indiana, lots of life changes. Long story short, it took till the pandemic, where I was actively involved in lots of other companies and helping other companies build their ideas. And finally I said, if I don't do this now, I never will. And so I worked through a lot of the things that I think were holding me back and like were my struggles with what would the future of Super Sisters look like. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about that, as the conversation progresses. But, it took my working myself through that before I said, let's do it. And so we started over the summer. First thing we did was we researched the 72 original women.
Now, I want to stop you real quick. Tell people, because you've said athletes and women, like I've held these cards when you and I've been together, and you should name drop a little.
We've got Gloria Steinem, we've got Margaret Mead, we've got lots of politicians, we've got great sports stars.
And it's diverse.
Sorry?
And it's diverse, like it's
Not
diverse.
All
white women. Yeah.
And that awesome. Is something that again, I'd love to talk about, but what is super interesting, because you brought it up, as we look back at the first 72 cards and started to do this research, which I'll tell you about, what really struck me was how incredibly diverse the group was. Not just in terms of their profession, but in terms of their political backgrounds, in terms of their race, in terms of their ethnicity, in terms of their age distribution, where they were in their lives when they made this mark as of 1978. And what I say is it was largely unintentional, right? My mom and my aunt set up this criteria, and these were the 500 women that met that criteria. It was a diverse set of women. And that is so cool that they didn't have to set out to say, we need this representation. It was already there.
And I want to remind people too, again, this was pre-internet. So this is also pre, branding yourself and having, people, handlers, right? So you have handwritten letters, from Shirley Chisholm and Gloria Steinem, and Helen Reddy, like it's so cool. And again, this is the precursor. It's just amazing. I want to, because you kind of told us how you got here to Indiana and to Super Sisters, which I love. What does that, now that you've gone all in and you are doing Super Sisters, what do you do? What are you doing? Like, what's your day-to-day? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So that's been so fun. So it really, again, it started in where I said, let me research of this original 72, which are the women that are still living. And we came up with about 38, and we did our best to try and track down, contact information, now including email and social media and mailing addresses. And we wrote to these 38 women, and we started hearing back from them. We've heard back from about 18 to 20 of them, that we've managed to connect with. And we asked them, we know what our ideas are for Super Sisters, but we started asking them what their ideas are, and also asking them, how they felt about the launch of Super Sisters. And we had an inkling, because there was a little bit of history that I failed to disclose earlier, that in 2019, we also got contacted by the BBC, British Broadcasting Company. And it was a producer of, in this case, a sports radio show. Okay. And so he had also come across the ESPN article, also come across the cards at the Met. And he had, prior to making contact with us now in Indiana, my mother and I, he had reached out to a number of the Olympic athletes, or athletes, not necessarily Olympians. And so he had a group of 7 that had already expressed their excitement and enthusiastic to get together in New York and talk about what Super Sisters meant to them. Yeah. And so by the time he found us, he invited us to come to New York, my mother and I. We joined the conversation, and he turned it into a 2-part documentary series, which went on to win a great award in radio. And it was this discussion with these women, as well as an audience of people that he brought together, all women who are interested in the future of sports for women athletes. And just this incredible coming together and hearing from these women about what Super Sisters had meant to them. So again, we kind of had an inkling that at least for these athletes, Super Sisters was a really important part of their journey. Because as you mentioned before, prior to that, they didn't get barely any attention. And so we as girls maybe knew about them if we watched the Olympics, or if we watched, tennis matches, or, some of that, but really they were, relatively speaking, unheard of in the mass media. And so it was great to hear back then what it meant to them. And again, when we reached out to these women, started reaching out to the more diverse group in lots of different fields, starting getting those same responses. Here's what it meant to me. Here's what happened when I would see my male colleagues showing up in, print textbooks, but no mention of me.
Yeah.
And so that's been really, really rewarding. So I'm continuing to do that work because 18 is not all of them, but tracking people down is still a challenge. So I'm spending a lot of time on social media, really trying to track down more and more people. But in these letters, we also ask them, if the concept of super sisters that I'd like to bring forth is to reprint the original cards, but also to print cards of current women of achievement. And so one of the things we've been doing is creating our own list. Who do we want to see on a card? And that's fun, that's exciting. But we also started asking these women that we've been in touch with, who do you want to see on these cards? And not surprisingly, many of the women, the original super sisters, are mentioning women or girls who are in their fields. They're the up and coming athletes or politicians or what have you. But it's really fun to see them nominating, these other folks, not necessarily even on the basis of what they've already accomplished, but what these people in their fields think they're going to be able to accomplish.
Okay, I want to put a pin in that for just a second, because I want to tie that back, because I know what you want to do with it, right? Yeah. So I have a little knowledge, and I want to really talk about that in vision and the legacy question at the end, because I want people to be really excited about it. And I want to make sure that we link to all those things. Also, I got to find that link for the documentary, so I can also link to that. I was totally unaware.
Yes. So as I said earlier, what was holding me back, or part of what was holding me back for several years, was, when we started getting contacted by people saying, bring it back. It was a diverse group of responses in terms of some people saying, just reprint the old cards. I want a copy of the old cards. I want a set. How do I get a set? And then we've got other people that are saying, really, in order to make it relevant to girls today, we want you to bring in new people. We want you to bring in current people that girls can look up to and read about and learn about. And so my struggle was, if I were doing this today, unlike when my mom and my aunt did it, they set their criteria, they researched those 500 people. Good news, there's way more than 500 that would appear on that list. That's fantastic. But I started thinking, who am I to decide on the next 72? People I'm interested in, I know who I'm interested in, but aren't necessarily who a 14-year-old girl might be interested in, or somebody from a different background might be interested in. And so what really had to happen for me was to come up with this idea of a crowdsourced nomination platform. And I want the ideas for who's to come next to come from anyone, to come from everyone. So I want to create a platform, a community where, almost like a Wikipedia, anyone can nominate someone, and it can be somebody that's already well known to the public, somebody that's already in the public eye, or it can be somebody that is important to them. It can be their niece, it can be their aunt, it can be their next door neighbor, it could be a young girl, it could be an older woman, it could be anyone. And I want all of the nominations, in quotes, to live somewhere, to live on somewhere, to be searchable. Because wouldn't it be great if somebody's next door neighbor was a 15-year-old girl who started a lemonade stand to raise money for global warming, whatever the case may be. That's pretty inspiring. And it might not be somebody that's made the public eye, but that's pretty inspiring. So we want those nominations to live. We also have this idea of, and again, I hate this terminology, but some sort of upvoting mechanism, so that certain women will kind of bubble up to the top, women and girls, and those will be the ones that will appear, not in a set of 72, but my idea is to make it an ongoing subscription product. So maybe it's 18 cards a quarter. So we're paying homage to that 72 number. But this idea of it will be an ongoing list. It will be ever evolving of the cards that get printed.
Now, you had mentioned the struggle, right, for getting some of that information back. So where have you found in this process, right, some of the joy? Where's the fun, the delight been coming from?
Yeah. So one, I'll just throw this little vignette out. Somebody asked me, a friend, who would Melissa, if you can get anyone to sign up to be on a card, who would it be? And their expectation, I know, was somebody like Michelle Obama,
who we would love to see on a card.
Yes, who we absolutely would love to see on a card. But the expectation was that I was going to name the most famous person, the most famous woman I could think of. And my comment was, who I'd really like to see? I'd like to see the next Amanda Gorman. We all just, many people knew about her before. I learned about her from the inauguration. That was my introduction to her. Wouldn't it be great if we found the next Amanda Gorman as a super sister, and that person got voted on? Again, hate that terminology. I think of something better. But so that person, everyone was like, wow, this person is really exciting and up and coming, and that's great. So that being my idea, when we wrote to some of the originals, there is a story of Letty Cotton Pogrebin, and she wrote us back, and she used her nomination slots. We asked for, which 3 to 6 women would you nominate? And she nominated her 2 daughters and her 2 granddaughters, who I don't believe are in the public eye right now. I don't know. I didn't research that. But I think she was, without prompting, she was saying, these are the people who I find my inspiration from. And I think that was like, this is so cool, because I didn't prompt that kind of response.
Oh, I love that so much. So tying kind of all of that together and where you are and, and the goals. And again, we'll talk about legacy after this question, but how can the community show up? What are those needs that you have now, whether it's for the record, everyone, I bought this with my money. This was not a gift because I love it.
But you deserve one.
It's also a super soft, really long sweatshirt. We can talk about it. But what can the community do?
Yeah. Right now it's really getting the word out there that this is we're calling it a comeback story. We're making a comeback and getting the word out there. My goal is likely going to be to set up a crowdfunding campaign to raise money to, do the research, create the platform, contact these women. It is a different world. I'm learning, as you pointed out, now a lot of these folks, they do have agents, and it's going to be a different process for getting in touch with them. But we really are hopeful that our unique differentiator, and this is important, because the original cards were permissioned. Meaning that we wrote them these letters, they signed the letters, but we also asked them, you submit the photo that you want to be included on the front of a card. You tell us the story of your accomplishments for the back of the card. We did redraft them so that they're all kind of in a consistent tone and format, appropriate for probably an 8 to 14-year-old girl, because that was the target market. But we also asked them, if you'd like to provide an original quote, or I don't even think we asked specifically for original, although many of them came up with original quotes specifically for Super Sisters. But so that idea of them telling their story is unique, even in today's sports card world or trading card world. Most of that is we research, we put it on, it's their statistics, it's the facts about them, it's what they've accomplished. We hope that the new Super Sisters cards are really going to be about what is the story that you want to tell to girls as their inspiration. Ooh. And so it's really meant to be truly educational and inspirational, not just for representation, but what's the story you feel is most important that you can contribute to other girls.
So that's what gives me all the goosebumps. That's why I love this project so much, because the people on the cards, one, give their own permission, but two, they get to tell their story as opposed to, an agent over here that's kind of pulling things in for them. And I just think it's so beautiful and exactly what girls want. And even what, I would love a set for my son. I think it's important that, as we raise children now, a lot of them don't, I remember, slight anecdote, but a woman telling me, when we had two women going to space, right, that were on, going to space and doing the moonwalk, that her son goes, Mom, are men allowed to be astronauts?
Love it.
That's what I'm talking about. I want to raise my son who also doesn't just assume that only men get these things, that women get to have their voice and women get to tell their story. And I love it. So
yes.
I know I love to say these are nugget conversations, but I can do this all day with you. So let's do the last question for people listening. So Melissa, how are you leaving your trace?
Yeah. So I this is a project that is so important to me, and I have to catch myself because I do call it a passion project. It is meant to be more than that. It will be more than that, but the origin is so much a passion project.
Who says that a passion project can't be legacy?
Can't be great. Right.
That is a very male patriarchal thing to say, that it's just about money and this. No, your passion should drive it. I'm in for this.
I agree. And I've had those responses. Oh, don't call it a passion project because it doesn't feel big enough. And like I said, I still call it a passion project, and I anticipate that it's going to be bigger, or big, not bigger, big. And so, the trace that I want to leave is to bring this back. And a part of it, and obviously the inspiration for me, is honoring my mother and my aunt, because it truly was, it was unique. It was different. It was first. Now there are other ways that women are celebrated, but back then there really wasn't. And so it was innovative. And I get really excited, and won't get into it now, but I do have hopes of even going beyond the print cards. We have some cool ideas that involve some pretty cutting edge technology stuff. And if Super Sisters can be a voice in some of these markets to truly bring the concept into the future, that will be really exciting.
Oh my God, I love it so much. Well, I'm so grateful for you and your time and sharing this with us. And we're going to put a ton of links in, and encourage everyone, please follow Super Sisters. Buy a shirt.
Yes.
When they're ready to crowdfund, do it. But I love this project and I love what you're doing, and it gives me goosebumps, and I'm just so excited. So I'm super grateful for your time, and thank you so much for sharing this journey with us.
Thank you. It's been fun. Thank you.